morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I am your co-host, Hugh David.
And I'm your other co-host, Dev Sodiger. And on today's show, we are going to be watching minute 48. And joining us on today's show, as we have all this week, is Leslie Byron Pitt, podcaster and film critic. Welcome back, Leslie.
How you doing? You all right?
It's good to have you back.
So, how are we doing? You enjoying this so far this week, Les, with us?
It's crazy. Like,
you can just say no. It's allowed.
I've never done anything like this before. Like I've podcast for
long time, man.
A long time now. Yeah, I think it's almost like 15 years, and it's just not something I've done before. In terms of the format, so there's an intensity about it, but it's also quite interesting in how to break down filmmaking and how to look at it. It's a nice different way of looking at filmmaking, and it's a lot less broader than I think we're getting from a lot of things at this moment in time. I found in these last couple of minutes, we're breaking stuff down and adding to a bigger conversation about the film as a whole, which is quite interesting. So
I think the other thing that interests me is that you've done. So you started off doing review podcasts, so classical, two thumbs up, even Roper style, let's talk about the film, and then moved on to open discussion, then refocused around one film at a time in a podcast, and very much, and then you obviously guested on a bunch of others, but there is usually a single film focus. The idea of breaking that one film then down into these component parts, you have to have the right film. And every week, every time that Dev and I do one of these episodes, I realize this is one of those films. I didn't think at first this would be that kind of film. I knew it was packed. I knew it was tightly edited. I just didn't think there was something in every minute to bring out a good conversation. And there is. There absolutely is. And so much of that has to do with what you said last episode about Craft and Armitage. Because Armitage started in the 60s. Started working in the 60s and 70s. This guy was around for New Hollywood.
Yeah.
So he is classical in the and yet, taking the risks and going with the flow. He's that perfect blend of old and new school of that era. And I think when you get to 97, there are other people doing what he's doing.
Yes.
But not quite like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you realise that he starts his films at the beginning of the 70s, so he's got all of that kind of craft and how those films were made in there. And this is him in the 90s now, and he's making something. Again, it's a solid movie. And what I tend to do when I'm watching movies is we're all on social media now, so I put what I'm watching down with pretty much every film I watch. And I've never had so many people, well, it's been a long time since so many people turn around and go, this is my favourite film. I love this movie.
Oh, wow.
I love this. This is great. I haven't seen it in ages. This is amazing, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's a real credit because I think he captures something in this movie. And I'm not sure if it's the needle drops. I'm not sure if it's just the simple craft or anything else like that. I think he captures something that just caught a whole bunch of people on the way, and it is, and I think it is in minutes like this. The minute we're about to do is interesting because the minute we just did before, you're seeing something build and grow and everything else like that, and the minute that we're going to watch now is you see something disrupt that, and that's going to be quite fun to kind of look into and have a look at as well. But I think it just captures a lot of people. It caught a lot of people at this time. It's quite interesting for me.
Dev, what's your take on this minute?
So I think we're kind of continuing to build on what we had in the previous minute. Actually, in my mind, Amy jumped in a lot earlier in this conversation than I'm finding out she actually did. Like, we get through this whole minute without still with no appearance from Amy, and it's we really see that kind of contrast in Debbie's demeanor come fully into focus at this point, right? She is all in. She is, no longer closed off. She's not sitting stiff. She's leaning forwards. She's engaged. She's wanting to unearth. She's wanting to find a reason to redeem Martin, and she's really reaching for that. And Martin's back to his, charming high school self. He's doing all of the things that you can see are the things that his teachers would have loved as when he was in high school. The things that got him the extra time on the assignment that he hadn't finished or whatever. I think this is like that really most telling of minutes for these two characters. I think this is even more so than the scenes in the radio station. This is where the relationship restarts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Although I still feel like he takes the choice to ask her out just at the end of the minute to the reunion. I still feel like he almost does that as a way of not having to explain any further to her what he's actually been doing for 10 years. Because she's like, he's talking about 10 bad people, and not when he's talking, she goes, "You're pathetic. What you need is a shock, the shock-raku," which is just a brilliant concept. A swift spiritual kick to the head. That's so hysterically like 90s California new age BS. And I swear to God, she's making it up just for the film, And but then he's like, "So how about I pick you up?" I'm like, dude. Like, what? Like, that's the point where you say.
What I love about like when she brings that up is you say it's such like West Coast like nonsense, really. But it's the kind of thing that kind of seeps through to a small town.
Oh, eventually, yeah.
That's the thing that I think works really, really well. The amount of times that if you ever in these kind of reunion moments and you speak to people and you see what they've picked up and everything, and that to me is sometimes a kind of worrying thing about the internet and everything. You see how certain things, how certain trends and everything kind of filters down into people, and it almost comes quite dangerous. This is kind of, again, it's quite a throwaway moment, but it's still very it's very, very honest. That element, there's an honesty about that I really enjoy.
No. So I did promise yesterday that we'd talk about the music in this minute, which is a little ironic considering we actually don't really hear any music in this minute. But the Hippo Club provides this contrast in the music for the film. Everything else is driven by the radio station. It's driven by the all 80s, all vinyl theming. Obviously, the high school reunion is pumping out maybe slightly more pop 80s music that makes sense if you've got a broad demographic of coming back to a high school. But this minute here has contemporary music for the time, right? Notably for me, the Eels, which was one of my favorite bands when I was in high school, and still is, because everybody knows that your music taste doesn't change after you leave high school. It's just locked there forever.
Yep.
And I feel like maybe this is a byproduct of growing up in the UK and the Eels not being the most prominent of bands. I struggle to imagine hearing the Eels in a bar, like especially a bar like this, right? Like maybe if it was proper dive bar, you've kind of got concert posters on the walls and stuff like that, then maybe you'd hear the Eels playing in the background. But this is, as we said, like it's kind of swanky. It's got a bit of a 40s vibe going on. It feels like an odd musical choice, and obviously with Joe Strummer's involvement, I have no doubt that like he would have loved the Eels and would be pushing it because he loves it, and it's still in a similar vein musically to what's actually getting pushed for most of the rest of the film. But
I do wonder though, because don't forget we did talk about the fact that he's involved in a lot, but there's also the musical coordinator we talked about, who it turns out worked on so many great 90s films.
That is a fair point. Yeah,
well, it may be a bit of both. I mean, I bet she introduced him to a lot of new stuff as well. The joy of the music industry,
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to find a name just so we can actually give it
because
credit.
I completely understand. I mean, it's you wouldn't hear the Eels in a bar, like you wouldn't even hear the Eels in the bar now, in
no,
like
no.
kind of being
Even though they're
ironic.
still going and they're still great.
And they're kind of, what I like about them. Never Came for the Soul. That's not really funny.
God, I love that song. So much.
All these songs, I loved, but they turned up for me, and the reason why I know of them, they turned up in very
Susan's
strange
House.
things. So That's Not Really Funny turns up as the beginning. It's the intro to Monkey Dust, the BBC animated program, and Never Came for the Soul was in loads of lit films, but all of them were quite introspective, and that's what makes this. It's such an interesting needle drop, and I think going back to how I found this film, a friend of my best friend for many years, Hannah, brought it to me, and I'm not surprised that she loved this movie. And one of the reasons why is because the music is so her, like so much of it is so her, and speaking to like I said earlier, like so many people go, oh, I love this, I love the soundtrack, I love this movie, or everything else like that. I think it's just this one thing where it kind of bends round up over the film, and it's ensnaring the audience that is playing for, as opposed to being in the actual movie. It's weird, both diegetic and non-diegetic at the same time. It's really strange. I don't think, like, again, I think you're completely right. You wouldn't hear the Eels in a place like that, and I think the reason why is because he's actually turning around and trying to coax the audience to feel like the characters do, and make a connection that way. It's a really interesting choice to put in there. I mean, I love the song, but it's an interesting choice to put in there, especially, I mean, Lucky Day in Hell, and he is turning around as a assassin, having an existential crisis, and going back to his 10-year-old to a 10-year-old relationship that has gone into wayside, and he is asking her to go back to a reunion. It's a bit on the nose.
Yeah. Well, and I think it also speaks to the location as well, the more immediate location, right? Because I feel like the Hippo Club is this kind of like singles bar for, like, especially once Amy enters, right? So you've also got like this kind of depressing, but maybe with a grain of optimism, like almost Smiths-esque. Yeah, it's like, this could be your lucky day in hell, because everybody hates being in this bar, but you might get lucky, right? Like, the Smiths, there's a club, if you'd like to go, you can meet someone, right? Like,
strangely, the Smiths, like I said the minutes before, Smiths is in The Killer. Literally, it's all in The Killer all the way through.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, the irony is kind of not lost here, where it does feel like one of those singles bar. I mean, the only other film I can think of with a bar like this at this moment in time right now would be Punch Drunk Love.
You're one of you that now. There's your favorite.
Yeah, doing a minute on that one would be crazy. But yeah, like there is the first date in that, and it's a very similar lighting, very similar kind of really weird hushed. It's not a dive bar, but it's also not as cool as this place. But also, this place is kind of cool for the 90s. that's the thing. Like, I can imagine the Hippo Club being kind of open now and no one going there now. Yeah, they're still playing Lucky Day.
One day, AI will run those DJs.
And on that bombshell, shall we end it for today?
Let's do it. Fantastic. So, this is yours, is it not, Dave?
It was, yes.
Sorry, my apologies.
This was minute 48 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, myself, Dev Sodiger, and my buddy, Hugh David.
Today's guest Leslie, Byron Pitt, broadcaster, podcaster, film critic, man about town. Leslie, where can people find you online, and what are you up to at the moment?
So you can find me if you type in AfroFilmViewer. It's most likely to be me. Currently trying to go back to blogging and rewriting some blogs and doing posts there, which is afrofilmviewer.blogspot.com. Also at Fatal Attractions, which is a podcast about erotic thrillers and what we love about them and hate about them.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. You can find us folks on all good podcast players, including whichever one you're listening to, as well as YouTube, Twitter, X, Spotify, and in all cases, our handle is at Debi Radio, DEBI Radio, and on our website as well, DEBI Radio, DebiRadio.com.
And if you want to talk with us, chat about the movie, chat about movies in general, you can find us on our Facebook listeners group, Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't done.